Do you feel like you're barely keeping your head above water? That no matter how hard you try, meaningful progress remains out of reach? Heather gets that. She battled an eating disorder for years before seeking help. Now in recovery, Heather is here to tell you that positive change is possible even when it doesn't feel that way. Join her as she shares openly about her struggles and small triumphs. Fair warning though, Heather doesn't hold back. Her candid story may trigger some. But for those wanting honesty, hope, and healing, this is 1% Better with Heather. The information and stories shared on 1% Better are based on host Heather's personal experiences with eating disorders and mental health challenges. Heather is not a licensed doctor, therapist, dietitian, or other health professional. Her advice and opinions should not be taken as professional medical advice. Please consult your physician or a qualified health provider regarding any medical or health-related issues. 1% Better also contains descriptions of eating disorders that may be triggering for some listeners. Discretion is advised.
Hey there, my little gaffers, and welcome to 1% Better with Heather. I am so excited for this next series of episodes. I will be interviewing Recovery Mom, as she's known on social media. I have a special connection with Recovery Mom. When I was at my sickest, I had a different social media account, and one day this woman popped up. I was immediately drawn to her. I fully believed that this was the universe trying to get my attention. I would watch her videos on loop all day long. She was around my age, she was fully recovered, and she had all the answers. From then on, she became my Yoda. There is no question you can ask her that she does not only have the medical answer to, but the mental health answer as well. She breaks everything down so eloquently with her sweet demeanor. She gives you your medicine with a spoonful of sugar. Recovery Mom is here to give back to the eating disorder community. She is the big sister you need. She has a heart of gold, and I'm privileged to call her my friend. Without any further ado, please welcome Recovery Mom. Hey there, my little gaffers, and welcome to 1% Better with Heather. On today's episode, I have a very special guest, Recovery Mom, as she's known on social media. Recovery Mom is just that, everyone's mom, everyone's big sister. She is my Yoda. She has all the answers as far as I'm concerned. Welcome, Recovery Mom.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Heather.
Oh, I love it. I love that you're here. This is quite the full circle moment, and I'm kind of like in a daze at the moment. But why don't we just jump right into it? And I don't know about you, but a lot of questions I get, because we're older, right? We're adults, we have kids, and we have kids, our kids age right in us, saying that their parents say they go into recovery, go into inpatient, come out, they've gained a little bit of weight or however much, and now their parents are looking at them going, well, how come you're not cured? What would your advice to be for parents of those kids? Like, what would you say to them? Like, take it easy on your kid, man, because
Yeah, and it's difficult because if your child does not want to get better, they're not going to get better. And I know Tabitha says that sometimes too, Tabitha Farrar. And it's really hard to hear as a parent. But eating disorders are sneaky. We both know that. If somebody does not want to get better, whether they're 13, whether they're 12, whether they're 19, they're going to find a way to stay sick. And so acknowledging that the power is in the child's hands, it really is the first thing. And the second thing is it takes years. It doesn't take months. It takes years to do all the rewiring. And your child is living in an environment. I don't know about you, but sometimes I think about the environment that we grew up in. Yes, it was extremely toxic, full of diet culture, but also I think about these kids today, and sometimes they write me and they see this and that, and I'm like, I don't fucking know. How the fuck are you going to recover in that? Sometimes I'm like, I couldn't have fucking recovered in the middle of that. I don't know how. Sometimes it just boggles my mind because it's so hard for them. It is insanely hard. And when they do get into a bigger body, it just gets exponentially harder, not easier. So, from your point of view, you're like, but they gained weight. They're doing so much better. But in their brain, it's worse than ever. It's 1,000 times worse because A, they're just as sick in their brain, but they're in a bigger body, which is your eating disorder's worst nightmare. And B, nobody else is acknowledging it anymore because they all think you're fine. So it's almost like you can't even talk about it and you have to present. So now you have to fake it. You have to present you're doing great. So they're stuck in this middle ground of feeling really sick and not wanting to hurt everybody by telling them they're not better. And that's a horrible place to be in. And for a parent, like, the best thing you could do is modeling, because our same-sex parent and our parents have more influence than you realize, have more influence than the friends, have more influence from social media. And so if you are the parent of someone with an eating disorder, I'm going to ask you to do a few things. Get rid of the non-fat milk. Get rid of the 2% milk. Only have full-fat milk in your house. Why are you having low-fat milk? Get rid of the low-fat yogurt. Only put full-fat yogurt in your house. Why are you having low-fat yogurt? What internal messages is that sending? Quit the Diet Coke. I know you're going to say, but I grew up on Diet Coke and it's what tastes better. Okay, change your fucking taste buds for your kids, right? Because if that's what tastes good because you've been having it for years, you can retrain your taste buds to like full calorie sugared Coke. You can. And so if you're sitting there drinking a Diet Coke all the time, but you're telling your kid who has an eating disorder they should eat the high calorie option because that's what's better, what the fuck are you telling them? And I know people say, and I said this for a long time myself, I grew up on Diet Coke, it's what tastes better. I grew up on a lot of shit, but you can change that. Just because that's what you grew up on or what you've had for a few years. I loved stevia. It was the best fucking thing on the earth. I loved stevia. I put it in everything. Guess what? I don't like it anymore. If I was to have it today, I would be like, ooh, that does not taste good because my taste buds changed. Just like that, you need to get rid of the Diet Coke, have the real Coke. When your kids come around, they're going to see mom drinking full calorie drinks and they're going to realize it's safe and it's okay to have those products. They're going to realize you don't have to be afraid of calories. You don't have to engage in things with the word diet on the label, right? I'm drinking a calorie soda right now. It is safe to drink calories. And your kids aren't going to learn that if they're watching you drink diet drinks. And I know it's hard, and a lot of people are going to come at me for that. I can tell you that right now, because every time I say that, people come at me. But your taste buds have been trained that way because you've trained them that way. Just like that, you can untrain them. And if you want your kids to be in an environment not conducive of continuing that eating disorder behavior, then you just should really think about the environment that you have them in. And I would honestly try to get rid of anything with the word diet. One of my favorite things is Skinny Pop. I love that popcorn. Every time I touch it, I have such a hard time because it has the word skinny on it. Like, I like the flavor and I like it, but man, I have a hard time buying it. And if my kid had an eating disorder, I would never allow that package in my house, ever, because I wouldn't want them to see it. I wouldn't want that image to go in their brain. And it's the same thing with Diet Coke. It's the same thing with, you know, low fat dairy products and all those things that we get because we think they're healthier. They might be healthier. My husband has pre-diabetes. Diet Coke might be healthier for him. If there was a child in my house with an eating disorder, the healthiest thing to have in that house are things without the name diet, right? Our full fat dairy products, our full, regular coconut diet. So if you have a child in your home with an eating disorder, try to fill it with things. Try to fill it with things that are helpful for their recovery and not things that they're going to see as diet products or health products, right? Try to take those labels out of your house. That would be huge. And then just be their cheerleader. Let the dietitian be the dietitian. Let the therapist be the therapist, right? Because when it comes down to it, if you harp on them, if you try to keep them, I mean, I know I was a teenager, you were a teenager. If my parents tried to tell me what I should or shouldn't do, I would do the opposite alone in my room, right? When they weren't looking. And for all these parents that think their kids are, doing those things, they're telling me on the side that they're doing those things. We talk to those kids. We know
Mm-hmm.
what they're doing, right? And they're engaging in those things when you're not around. But if you can just try to be a cheerleader and open up the communication and when they do tell you things, just try to keep a stoic kind of a atmosphere around it, just a calmness so that they can come to you. Because one of my kids had a lot of trauma, and I used to try to tell them, you should do, you, and with the best intentions, you should do this. You should really leave him. You should do that. And what did I do? I pushed them away. And then they just got closer with that person, and they'd never opened up to me. When I shut the fuck up and just quietly was there, all of a sudden they were able to open up, they were able to gain strength, and they were able to do the right thing. But it wasn't until I shut the fuck up and got out of the way and just sat quietly as a calming force of love that they could be around, right?
Well, and I think, and you bring up a very good point here, though, too. And I'm not an American, I'm Canadian, so I don't know all the ins and outs of America and what goes on. And I was never in inpatient or anything like that. I was in the hospital, yeah, but not like over there. And I know, like, I've talked to a couple other parents who have sent their kids to treatment. The money almost dropped dead. And and I see it from the parent point of view because, like, someone told me it was like over 100 grand, right? And if you don't have insurance, where the hell's that money coming from? That's a house, right? And it's not guaranteed to work.
Mm-hmm.
And I have my own views on treatment centers and the hospital. I stand by, but I can only go by my experience. I'm sure there's great places. I have not met one person that has not come out traumatized more than when they went in, but that's my
Mm-hmm.
2 cents.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so you have to expect them coming out. It's not like they didn't just click a switch in their brain and everything's okay.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot more other stuff coming up.
Yeah.
And
Treatment centers
as
are I hear the same things. I mean, when's the last time you heard a positive experience?
I've never have,
No, same.
never.
And I know that in America, the human who owned the majority of the treatment centers just sold them for over $1 billion
Oh,
and made a ton of money. And in America, they will only accept certain insurances, and they're very picky because they want to make the most money. So that leaves a lot of people, humans, who can't get in them. And then they've also taken, because they're taking the good insurances, the other places can't stay afloat because they can't make enough just by taking Medicaid patients alone. So by them hoarding all of the good insurance patients and leaving all of the Medicaid patients, the other places like the hospital inpatients and things like that can't tend to stay afloat, and there's not enough of them to help humans because they don't have enough other insurances to offset what they're intaking. Does that make sense? So they
mm-hmm.
can't, there's just such a disparity for help anyway. It's just all about getting humans in, getting them out, getting them in, getting them out to get as much money as they can. It's just
Your number.
it's awful. I honestly feel like, research has shown that statistically, your odds of recovering are higher without going inpatient than with. And I feel like in America, eventually, there's going to be a class action lawsuit against all these inpatient facilities because people are going to come together and say, look, where else in the medical field could you have such a low success rate and still be in business and taking money. That's not okay. It's like duping people. It's like saying, we're going to help you with this medical condition. Oh, we didn't help you, right? You can't go in to a dialysis center or a heart, right? A heart center or a neurological center facility and come out with those kind of low success rates, right? High failure rates and stay in business. Yet eating disorder places do, and nobody's watching it and doing anything. And I think eventually humans are going to come together and a couple of lawyers are going to get on board and they're going to say, look, class action lawsuit time, because you cannot keep doing this to humans. And eventually they're going to band together. And I think in the next 2 years that's bound to happen over here.
Well, okay, so now you bring up an interesting point of a low success rate. Because if you looked at anything else, like you could go to rehab for any other addiction, right? You can go, there's a lot of places you can go, a lot with a great success rate, because there is like a, I don't know, what do you want to call it? Like a guide, right? Eating disorders, and maybe this is where we come in, like we got to like make a Bible here of what is
Mm-hmm.
recovered and what's not. I always call those treatment centers like you're putting a band-aid on a war wound. You're doing
Yeah.
absolutely nothing.
Well, and I think that stems from the fact that like the DSM, it the definition of what an eating disorder is still from the early 80s. I think like 1982, right? And since the early 80s, there's been a ton of research. We know so much more, but they haven't caught up yet. And so we're still not acknowledging what's really happening. According to those textbooks, it could be your controlling mother that caused this. It could be, like society that caused this. But now we know that it's energy deficit and hormonal and neurobiological. Like we know now that it's genetic and we know for sure all of these things. But those two haven't been married yet. And I feel like every time someone in the community, like Dr. Geisinger or Tabitha Farrar or somebody, tries to create research and acknowledge these things, and there's been other, endocrinologists and things that have done research, I feel like the big boys club of the, medical field, the psychological field, they come in and say, no, we don't want to accept that. We don't want to, change, because they're the people that have made those guidelines in the DSM. And they don't want to admit that maybe we were missing something. But eventually those two things are going to have to come together. But I feel like right now, that's where the huge disparity is. Because if you're going to take insurance, you have to go off the DSM and those kind of things. You can't take Tabitha Farrar's thoughts, right? Or Dr. Geisinger's thoughts if you're going to take someone's insurance. And so they really don't have a leg to stand on. They have to do those in treatment centers, which is ridiculous, and it's not going to get anybody anywhere. And so it's going to take a huge shift before people start really acknowledging. And once we do that, we can start changing treatment. But people still have a really hard time acknowledging that shift. And I think, and we were talking about this before we went on camera. We were talking about, I was telling you that my husband is extremely religious. And it's kind of, I feel like it's kind of that same kind of thing, because when you say the word evolution, people who are religious freak out. They shut down because they're like, oh my God, no, no, we can't talk about that. We can't talk about that. That's awful. But we have proof now. Things have evolved evolutionary in our brain, right? Things have happened research wise to show. And just because I'm using the word evolution doesn't mean I'm discounting your God. And so a lot of times, because we use that word, we're shutting down a whole group of humans that now don't want to hear what we have to say, right? And so it's really hard and tricky when you're using words like evolutionary biology. Because a lot of people, if I just say biology, they'll be like, oh, yeah, I agree. It's in your genetics, it's in your biology. But then when I say the word evolutionary biology, they're like, oh, no, 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 we can't talk about that. And they're one and the same. Our biology
Mm-hmm.
changes over time. Our biology changes over time to adapt to our environment. that's been since the beginning of time. Just like our brains are different now because of all of the tablets and phones and social media than they were before then. We're adapting just like we did then. But when I say that word, like my husband, so religious. Like we're talking about every Sunday morning I wake up and he's got I don't even know, the sermon or whatever on the TV really loud, and this is what I wake up to every Sunday. We pray. He prays before every meal. Like his mother, they're just extremely religious. When he grew up, his grandpa built a church. They wore the shawl, like all of that. Me, I grew up being told that churches are bad. Religious people only want your money. Stay away from them. That's how I grew up. So I grew up not religious, and I'm not religious. But my husband, when I got an eating disorder, was convinced it's the devil. I have the devil in me. He told me this. You just have the devil in you, and I'm not praying enough. I need to pray more for you. And it was really hard for us to marry the two. It was really difficult for him to understand that I can have an evolutionary adaptation to famine and he can still have his religion. Those two things can exist together. And I took him once to see Dr. Geisinger so that she could better explain
Mm-hmm.
what was happening in my brain and what chemicals were different and what hormones and neurotransmitters were off so that we could discuss what was actually happening so that he could see, because I was like, why is your high cholesterol not the devil?
Right.
Right?
Yeah. So
But this
he's
is,
calling people for an exorcism, and yeah,
yeah.
you can pray all you like, right? But
Yeah, so it's just a long history of
it's hard.
where, religion has come from, and I would never want to discount his faith or take that away from him. It is who he is. But on the same token, you can say the word evolutionary biology and he can still have that faith and I can still recover, right? And it was really hard for him to realize that he could still pray for me, but I could also still think the devil wasn't in my head. Like those two things can't exist,
Mm-hmm.
and I can still recover, right? I mean, he probably thinks, well, I'm sure he thinks it was his prayer that recovered me. But
Well,
we can both think
we
those
can throw him a
things, right?
bone.
He can think that, and I can think what I think, and
Yeah.
we can both exist and love together, right? But I do think that's where a lot of the pushback comes in, because when you do say that word, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people do immediately, like Tabitha Farah's book is all about the migration theory. Well, you say the word migration and evolution, and a lot of humans are really just taken aback, and they kind of shut down because they feel like they're not being true to their religion. And you
Right.
can be true to your religion and your God and still listen and understand where our biology came from. Those things can happen together.
That no, you're totally right there. No, for sure. That totally can happen. Do you think um because there isn't a big like the 12-step program and there is a guide, I don't know if you notice this. Do you think that people in the eating disorder land like us put a big red flag in front of that as well before anything can get stopped? Because I notice a lot of people who play victim, right? And you can't say that around me because you trigger me. I hate that word trigger. I hate it. I hate it with
People get so
passion.
pissed when you call that out too. They get so fucking mad. They
Oh,
get so upset when you say, like it's on you or take responsibility or like if
but
you
it
can
is like,
recover, like yeah.
yeah, no, I don't care about your triggers. Pick up like the world is not here
Mm-hmm.
to go around you. I hate to break news to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in order to get better, you have to take responsibility for yourself. It's not my
Yeah.
job. I remember when I was in the hospital and the dietitian said to me, he's like, I don't want to trigger you. Do you have any triggers? I'm like, no, like I'm crazy, but I'm not that crazy. And he said, well, I couldn't say the word orange around a girl because she would flip out. And I was like, come on. You're telling me if I said, oh, the flowers look pretty in your picture and you're going to be like, oh my God, you're flipping me out? Come on. Like, I think
Yeah.
that, and I think the people in our own community that should be open for help, block it because
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you get haters. I get haters. I don't care. Bring it on, haters or fans. And, but that's the truth. You have to put a mirror up to your face and be like, dude, you got to recover.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my videos I did on TikTok that had the absolute hugest comment section of humans telling me how wrong I was when I somebody asked me about eating. I can't even remember. And I just kind of ranted and I was like, don't you can't, stop saying you can't fucking eat because you can. Say you don't want to. Say you don't want to gain weight. Say it feels bad. Say you're guilty. Say you're shamed. But you can. You can do. You can. You're not missing arms. Some humans are missing arms. They might not be able to
Hmm.
physically eat themselves, but you can. And it kind of went off. And oh man, the people in that comment section. But what if you have trauma? But maybe they're triggering. You shouldn't yell. You shouldn't this. And I was just like, then scroll. Or, everywhere you go, the workplace has triggers. Your school has triggers. Everywhere I go, there's someone skinnier than me. They're going to have a thigh gap, or they're going to be eating something, or they're going to have a diet food, or they're going to have a diet Coke, and I'm going to wish I could have, like, everywhere. And if you don't start managing those, you're not going to recover. And I get that you might be in the beginning of your recovery and it might set you back. Then put up some boundaries and unfollow me for a while, right? Because on my Instagram, I unfollowed everyone with a smaller body than me. That was a
And
trigger, right? It was. And I unfollowed them all. And I needed to at that time because I would have not eaten. So I do understand. But I didn't go to that person's thing and say, God damn it, you're triggering me. I took care of myself. I put up a boundary. And then when I was ready, I brought it back, right?
it's funny that you say that because I remember watching that TikTok of yours and I'm like, why would you get rid of skinny people? And I was still sick then, right? And I was like, what the like that it just didn't make sense in my head. And I'm lying in bed in recovery. It's January. And I'm like almost a month in, and I start watching the OC. I am not ragging on the OC. I love that
Oh
show,
my God, I watched
right?
when you talked about that on TikTok. I watched you talk about
From
that.
like 2004 or whatever. And all those girls are freaking lollipops and they're all in bikinis. And holy, I thought I was having a nervous breakdown. I could not stop crying. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? That's not their fault. It's a great
No,
show.
yeah.
Right? That was me. Now I can watch it again. But like
Yeah.
we're like a year. Like
But like,
where I would see a girl
honestly,
in bikini and bawl.
yeah. And you could get anything could do that. I watched the new Avatar movie, and halfway through the new Avatar movie, I was like, why are the fucking avatars so skinny? Like, what is going on? Why are we making these people like it was really unusual, their body shapes, and I was just like, this is weird, this is not okay. It just felt wrong, and it felt like that kind of triggering content that you would get on Pro Anna or something. It was fascinating to me. I was just like, I wonder if they model these humans or these avatars on like something triggering in order to like trigger a certain part of a human's brain or something. But at one point in time, I probably couldn't have watched Avatar because even though they weren't human, it would have triggered me. But eventually, the world is a trigger. Everywhere is a trigger. And I totally agree with you. You you got to take care of you. And to go onto people's comments or whatever and to be like, this is triggering me or that's triggering me, or what triggers you might not trigger someone else. It's like the what I eat in a day. Like, I loved those. I get so much fucking hate because I love those. And I watched them. You probably could not name a human 4 years ago that had a what I eat in a day that I did not watch. I watched every one. And not only did I watch them, but I went to my dietitian and said, what did you eat yesterday? Tell me every single thing. And she would do it. She'd be like, okay, I had this for breakfast. I had this. And she would have a hard time remembering. I was like, how could you not remember? I remember what I ate last Tuesday. How could you not remember what you ate yesterday? Then I would go to my therapist and I would say, tell me everything you ate yesterday. And some people I know that's triggering and unhelpful, it saved my life. Because when I would go to make breakfast and I would go to make one egg, my brain would go, Elizabeth would eat two eggs. She would never eat one. She would even eat three. I can't just have one. And it kind of gave me a guide because I know for us who grew up in diet culture, my mom never ate eggs. She never ate breakfast. She never ate breakfast. She never even ate. I don't even know if I ever saw my mom eat. And if she
Yeah,
did eat, she would say stuff like, I can't eat now. I'm eating dinner later. Like, wait, so we don't
yeah,
eat all day if we're eating dinner? Like that, literally. Or if she
that
ate
makes
lunch, it
sense.
was like, I'm eating this. I can't eat the rest of the day. So it was always, I didn't know what it looked like to eat during a day. And I know you're going to say sometimes they're really triggering, but then you learn that. So I would watch what I eat in a day, and it would be really like there would be nothing to it. And I would go, that's not enough food. That's not enough breakfast. Elizabeth would have had three. You learn, and that's part of learning. And I couldn't pad myself around the triggering what I eat in a day. I loved them, and they were extra. Like I say this all the time. If it weren't for what I eat in a day, I wouldn't fucking know what to eat a day. I would have never been able to figure it out. I would not. So they literally saved my life. And yes, they're triggering. A lot of them are. A lot of them are. But also some of them aren't. And along the way, when you learn how to discern the difference, you're teaching your brain what is not enough and what is enough, right? And now when I look at one that's not enough, I'm like, oh, girly, that's not enough, you know? And you know.
Well, I'm not backtracking, but I will say I don't have a problem with what I eat in the days. I love watching. I don't know how I got on competitive eating TikTok, but I'm there. I'm watching it, and I just think, man, I miss my calling. I should have done this when I was in recovery because you got
Yeah.
nothing on a couple girls coming out of centers. But what my deal is with when I'm watching girls who are very, very ill and saying that they took down the whole pizza shop
Yeah.
for the last month and their
Yeah.
bodies have not changed.
Yeah.
There's my issue there. There's one girl, and I can't even remember to call her out, like just to give her a shout out in a nice way. I know she's in England, but she would record her extreme hungers. And I wasn't in recovery yet, and I'd think there's no way in hell. Cause I'm like that like and she
Does
was
she have
she
them
was
up
going for
anymore?
it. I haven't seen one in a bit.
As I think I know who you mean. Yeah.
Because she
It,
went
was
on
it really
vacation.
was it really fancy food? Like five-star
Yeah,
hotel food? Yeah. No, I want.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah.
would talk. I
Right?
chatted with her.
And
Yeah.
but and I like watching
Mhm.
like different countries' foods, right? I'm like, oh, we don't have that here. Oh, we don't have that here. Oh, that looks cool, right? But I have a problem with just the BS of it.
Yeah.
Either you're going to recover and tell people who don't know any better that like you're going to
Yeah.
be helpful and not
But also,
not.
they're always going to be there, right?
Hmm.
So maybe they're sick and they're not in a place where they can be honest. I was there. I wasn't on social media in there, but I was there in my own home, right? I was telling everybody I was eating all this food, and really I was throwing it in the trash. They were handing me corn dogs in the back of the car, and I was throwing it out the window. I was doing that. I just wasn't doing it on social media. Now people do it on social media. So they're just not recovered. And I guess I can have some empathy for the fact that they're not recovered. And it's our responsibility to be like, to see through that and to just move along. And on the flip side, I can look back to my Instagram, and my Instagram starts before my face because when I started my Instagram, my kids didn't know I had an eating disorder. So I would just do food. And I didn't want it, it was a secret. Like nobody knew I had it. So my kids came to sit by me on the couch. I'd have to swipe out of my Instagram, right? So they didn't know that I had one. And I was always so scared they were going to find it. And I was, oh my gosh, I lived in fear and terror. And if I go back and look now, I would do like a full day of eating and it would be nothing. There would be no food. It was like the smallest amount of food. And I would swipe through and it'd be like this little like quarter cup of popcorn, right? And then this like, I don't even know what, this tiniest little bit of 2 carrots on a plate with like one slice of a chicken breast. Not a chicken breast, but a slice, right? Just like a tiny. And I would be so proud. And when I look back now, how triggering. What a lack of food. But it's where I was. That was my what I eat in a day. And I was proud of that because I was in recovery. And I was only eating spinach and bell peppers, mustard, and vinegar. That's all I was eating. So to add that slice of chicken was huge. To put it on that Instagram was like, I don't know if it was empowering. It didn't feel triggering to me. At that time, it felt like I was really doing something. And I do see some what I eat in a day now. And they are sparse and there's nothing to them. And I try to be like, maybe that's where they are. Maybe they were eating nothing and that's where they are right now.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully they'll keep moving. Maybe they won't keep moving. Maybe they'll keep adding food and say they're eating a whole pizza and stay skinny because they're throwing it away. And some people do that,
You're
right?
right.
Just like some people with those 10,000 calorie challenges are eating all that food and throwing it up or whatever. Of course they are sometimes. But also, you and I both know, I used to watch those 10,000 calories and I used to be like, I could do that. I could do that today and still be hungry, right? We know it's possible and I could
Mm-hmm.
do that. So I guess I just see it from a different like perspective of sure some of them are lying, but also that's where some of them are. And when I look back on my Instagram, and I never removed any of that stuff, I always left that stuff there so that I could look back and see it. I look at those what I and it's really bad filming, by the way. Also, it's like if all the lighting is like sepia or some
Ah.
weird kind of, I don't know, filter at the moment that I thought was cool because I didn't have kids to look at my shit and tell me how awful it is and try to fix it. And there was nothing to them. And so if me and you back then would have looked at that, we would have been like, oh my God, that's a triggering what I eat in a day. That full day of eating, there's nothing there. That person's not recovering. But in reality, that was a huge step for me, what I was eating right
Mm-hmm.
then, right? And I was documenting it, just like you documented the beginning of your recovery. And so like we
Mm-hmm.
have to have a little bit of empathy, sympathy for these young people who are trying to also document where they are, which might be the beginning. And hopefully,
Mm-hmm.
maybe they're not going to make it, but hopefully some of them do keep going and adding food and making it. And of course, a percentage of those people are going to get some likes and then all of a sudden feel like they should add more and then get sucked in and then start pretending they're eating things and not, right? Of course they're going to do that because peer pressure is probably huge for these poor kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, it could go every for every good, there's a bad, right? I just try to tell people like just really look at it. If they're at 1 million views and they have sponsors,
Mm-hmm.
and I know what contracts say, right? Then just
Yeah.
take it with a grain of salt. Take everything with a grain of salt. Like
Mm-hmm. I
that's
try
all
to
we can
not
do.
follow anybody with like that many followers. I just don't. I just like to see real people, right? I just like to,
Yeah.
and a lot of times I feel like if they have that many followers, they kind of lose the realness sometimes. I mean, they just don't feel connectable or they don't feel like, I guess I just want to follow people I feel like I could DM,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. Like looking for your village, man. I'm
Yep.
always saying it. Like just looking for someone, and you touched on it earlier, like trying to find someone who understands your language.
Yep.
It's like going to, again, France. I'm going to pick on France. Going to go to France, don't speak French, and you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to say bathroom, and they're like pointing at the sky. Eventually, like you're just like, fine, fuck it, I'll go figure it out. Right. So either you don't go to the bathroom or like you figure it out.
Yep.
So that's how I feel. Well, I can't thank you enough for sticking with us today. And again, your social media is
Is Recovery Mom? I think I need to look it up, Heather. I don't fucking know. It's Recovery
ah.
Mom underscore, I think. Yeah.
We'll tag you. We'll tag you in the video.
All right.
All right.
That'll
Thank
work.
you so much for having me
Yeah.
or
It was
having
fun.
coming on.
It was fun.
Thanks.
That's all for this episode of 1% Better. To continue the conversation, head over to our website at www.1percentbetter.ca, where you can access more stories and resources. We'd also love it if you subscribed and left us a review on your favorite podcast platform. And remember, friends, progress takes patience, perspective, and sometimes a little help from people who get it. So be kind to yourself and others as we work to get 1% better every day. We'll see you back here next week.